Good afternoon and good evening, Ben.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Yeah, good evening to me. Exactly.
We got all the time zones confused.
You're right. All right. So we are in Pirkei Avot. We should be in Mishnah Yud, the 10th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So let's jump right in, and then we'll take it from there. Shmaya ve'avtalyon kiblu mehem. שמעיה אומר, אוהב את המלאכה, ושנא את הרבנות, ואל תתוודע לרשות. Shmaya and Avtalyon received the oral tradition from them. Shmaya used to say, love work, hate acting the superior, and do not attempt to draw near to the ruling authority.
Yeah. Okay, so this is where the English actually makes it like the English is more clear. It kind of chooses one interpretation, and in the Hebrew you can have I basically wrote, I don't know what this means.
Well, when they say hate the Rabbanut, and right. So, okay. So first off, our classic, let's first jump into some context over here. So here again, we're talking about the twins. These are two pretty famous twins, Shmaya and Avtalyon. So here we're at the days of the end of the Hasmonean period, and we're getting close to Herod's period as well. Just from a historical point of view, the Hasmonean period altogether is roughly 200 plus years. Maimonides cites that as well, while the split is usually 103 years for, let's say, the original Hasmonean house, and then there's dynasty, and then there's from Herod, there's another 100 something years, but altogether it's around 200 years of the Hasmonean dynasty. And we have these two characters, Shmaya and Avtalyon, who received their oral tradition from them, who we just read previously in the last previous portion. And these two characters, interestingly enough, are, the Talmud tells us that they are either they themselves were converts or they were sons of converts, that their lineage goes back to Sancheriv. Sancheriv is one of the generals that part of the exile of the 10 tribes. And this is just another example of, while it's not biblical like Ruth, but where you could see again the foreigner coming in from the outside and then being grafted back inside. And here again is a major character, right? So you have them being descendants of people that were caused the exile of the 10 tribes. However, now when they're grafted back inside, they're being very instrumental, obviously, for the continual growth of the Jewish people at the time. Okay, so and also they were super famous. It's like the Simon and Garfunkel at the time. They outshined the high priest as well, the Kohen Gadol, right. And they were really loved by many of the community at that time. So let's get
a question for you in terms of the so Shmaya and Avtalyon, or all of these pairs. Does this do we take it for granted that they were on the Sanhedrin?
Yeah. They're part of the Sanhedrin. Later on, when Hillel comes in, and we'll see it later, Hillel also brings in the Nasi, he brings in another position into the Sanhedrin, and he brings in this new authority. But that's also a power move in relation to when Hillel's involved, he's already fully immersed in Herod's reign. And then there's an idea also removing the corruption away from the priests and moving more towards the authority of the Sanhedrin. So, but they're currently, yes, they're part of the Sanhedrin.
Right. Okay.
Hey, Flevis, how are you? And there's a link if anyone wants to sit and enjoy and join in as well, by the way. Okay. So they tell us over here, love work, right? So we have love the work. So the general translation usually is manual labor. Okay. So that's the kind of work you should be loving. One, because it doesn't make you a burden on society, right? You could teach a man, you could give a man a fish, or you could teach him how to fish, and then he won't go hungry for the rest of his life. So the idea is we really want it to be something very proactive, something that you could take care of yourself. We have Also, it's just the fact of the matter that it's keeping you out of trouble. You're going to be busy the whole time. You won't have time to be gambling. You won't have time to be like chasing women. You'll just be keeping your nose down and your mind busy. And the classic idea of that, true rest only comes from true labor, right? So even God, after 6 days of creation, ultimately takes his seventh day to rest. But that happens from like a burst of creativity, which makes one, gives someone meaning. This relates a little to the issues people had with universal basic income, right? Will this cause of a lack of meaning for everyone, what they're going to be doing with their time? So we start with love work as a very practical piece of advice. And we're going to put also this into context.
Right. But, and they choose, you say manual labor, is that related also to the fact that melacha is specifically the word that is used, like melacha versus avodah, and melacha being something that is not, you cannot do on Shabbat, on Sabbath, right?
Yes. So I hear what you're saying. So we could play with that and say yes. I would say, just generally speaking, when they're using melacha in that term at that time means manual labor, but also what you're alluding to, which is like, it doesn't mean like some random job, but more of the issue, the jobs that would be prohibited on the Sabbath, which was most jobs basically at the time. So we could work with that interpretation. I like that. Okay, so then we have hate acting the superior, right? Which in Hebrew is usnet rabbanut, which people like because the rabbinate, what it sounds like is like hate the rabbinic authority. And you would wonder like, why are rabbis saying that you should hate the rabbinic authority? But generally speaking, it's talking about, like the translation gives us over here, about your superior. So it's like I don't know if it's the first version, but it's a very early version of speak truth to power and like hate the man sort of attitude, and for multiple reasons. One is it doesn't put you in an ideal situation because it could lead to corruption. You're in a superior position right now, and something's going to come your way, and you'll decide to manipulate the system. B, built into the idea of power corrupts, like built into this position, this superior position, you're going to it's inherently there's corruption built into it. You have there's like a wordplay of rabbanut, so this only works in Hebrew, but like hitrav revut, like showing off. So again, it has to do with sort of like title, status, position. So like we want you to avoid that as well. And in this position that you're in, this superior position that you're in, you need to be dealing with two things. One, you're always going to be dealing with saying no to some people, right? You're going to have to say yes. You're going to have to say no to some people. So it's not an ideal position to be putting yourself into. And secondly, and this relates more to actually the rabbinic aspect, is like if you're dealing at the Sanhedrin level, you're also dealing a lot with like monetary issues. And for example, today, if I was a Sanhedrin and I'm rubbing shoulders with Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, I want to start investing more or be involved. Well, both of them are not like in investment banking, but either way, like if I'm dealing with like Goldman Sachs, right, and I'm a Sanhedrin, you might lead you to be in that world. And this
right, I don't know what's the term.
Right? So government and finance or money, at least. Here you have, this goes back to the original sentence we said, the thing that Shemaiah said, which is Ehovet HaMelacha. Don't waste your time with these other positions. Really, you should just be focused on manual labor, and that's where like the main focus should be. However, this would lead to a question, obviously, which is then who should do it then, right? You just told us, okay, don't focus and you shouldn't be doing this and this shouldn't be a job that you do. Then who is doing these jobs? Because someone needs to do it. So there's an interpretation, which is only the people that hate it are the people that should get the job. Like anyone that could fully internalize the idea of like, I'm doing this because I need to do this, which you would say like, we're going into election season soon in the States. So you're going to hear a lot of like, I don't need to do this. Or I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this for the people. So the idea is someone that like this job is chasing more than he's chasing it. So the person that knows how to, to integrate that, being like, I wish I could do something else, but I have to do this. So that would be the case of why we're not telling anyone to do it, because it just sort of should be clear who needs to do it, and you shouldn't be chasing after it.
Yeah, that sentiment sounds familiar from different places.
Baz is telling us over here, in many respects, blue collar work is more satisfying, fulfilling than office work. I would agree, and our sages agree with you as well. And he's writing over here, that's my thought on Sunday chores. I hate it. Okay, exactly. So he's doing it because he hates it. He understands. Your wife knew it as well. She knew that you're really worthy because you hate it. Okay, so, and just in general, this is again sort of like we get into the next line, which is Ve'al tivadal rashut, right? And do not attempt to draw near to the ruling authority. So this is again like an early version of like very pro small government, libertarian sort of. You don't, and Maimonides says this as well. Like once you get involved with them, they're not going to let you go. And the attitude is general. The government is always self-serving. While they have their claims that they want to take care of you and want to help you, at the end of the day, like they're out to get you and they're going to take care of themselves first. And there's a real push over here to really, remove yourself from the government. Now, we need to put this, because seemingly this sounds a little strange, back to the context we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. This is the end of the first phase one of the Hasmonean dynasty. Herod's coming in. There's a lot of distrust with Herod, and he's not pro the Sanhedrin. It gets very intense. Obviously, there's different interpretations, whether it's in Josephus or in the Talmud, but Josephus' account seemingly maybe makes more historical sense. But there's a time where Herod or put down some sort of rabble rousers, but in a very drastic way, and he gets summoned to the Sanhedrin. And when he gets summoned to the Sanhedrin, Shemaiah is basically calling him out, and he's saying, like, I'll hear you if the rest of the people, of your court agree. Mm-hmm. And he looks on right to left, and their faces are looking down, and they're all like embarrassed. And he tells them that in the Gemara it says they all died and turned into bones. In reality, what Josephus says is like they were embarrassed, they didn't say anything, and at the end, Herod kills all of them. But basically, you're hearing echoes over here of Shammai and Avtalion saying, we've dealt with government before. We know this is bad news. We know they could flip a switch in any moment. So really, you should sort of keep your distance from this institution. It's a very big political statement over here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm curious what Avtalion would say, because again, with the pairs and the working with each other, because he seems to be very biased in terms of like biasing towards don't attempt to reach the top, right? Like hate acting the superior, and then don't get close to the ruling authority, and like just be satisfied with the things that you do day to day. I wonder just what with Shemaiah was. It sounds like Shemaiah maybe he was in the Sanhedrin, but was he also? Is there any idea about him having some kind of occupation or doing something beyond the Sanhedrin?
Not that I recall. I know that there's, again, I think in some cases it's Avtalion who's talking. In some cases it's Shemaiah that's talking. I'm going to write that down though to see if I could find. 1 second, I have to see if I can find a difference with their attitude. I hear what you're saying because they're the pairs, but seemingly both signed off on this one. Oh. That you should be careful from the government. Okay.
Next.
Next one over here. We have okay. Avtalion Omer. Chachamim. היזהרו בדבריכם, שמא תחוו חובת גלות, ותגלו למקום מים הרעים, וישתו התלמידים הבאים אחריכם, וימותו, ונמצא שם שמיים מתחלל. Avtalion used to say, sages, be careful with your words. lest you incur the penalty of exile and be carried off to a place of evil waters, and the disciples who follow you drink and die, and thus the name of heaven becomes profaned. Okay, so here too. Well, we don't have to do context. We know who we're talking about, but again, this is related in a little to the context. One, okay, we go back to you need to be mindful with your words, right? So there's different interpretations of what this means, and we played around with this a little in the earlier portions, which is one, too much thinky talky, you could leave you misunderstood. You have to make sure you're being very clear with the words you're saying and how you're articulating yourself, because there could be grave consequences if someone misunderstands you. There's also a stress, which is, generally speaking, everyone should be mindful with their words, but specifically the sages, because people actually listen to you, right? And this is also hinting to the fact, which is there is less focus right now on the temple and the priest, and rather there's more focus on the Sanhedrin and the people, and that's why really all ears are to you right now. So you need to be very mindful. Also, you need to be very mindful that you don't have your A game on, basically, as in it could be that you're speaking when you're tired, or you're speaking when you're restless, and those would be the wrong time to be giving advice or be giving a sermon. There's a more radical take, which is a play on words. Hizaharu b'divrachem. This is also a time where the Zohar, the seminal text of mysticism, Jewish mysticism, is making the rounds, or sort of coming out potentially, or versions of this are being dealt with. And in the Zohar, it says that if we want to hasten the redemption and shorten the exile, we should be learning the Zohar, because it allows you to widen and open up your understanding of the Torah. And this would be a play on words, saying the Chachamim hizaru b'divrachem, like sages, enlighten your words, as in fill them with the Zohar. So Shema tachvu chovat galut, because if you don't, you're going to stay in exile longer. Right. So that's a completely different take, sort of, on that, on those words. Generally speaking, it's one should be wary with their words, and this goes back to what we said earlier with Herod, right? So we know Shmai and Avtalion already had their run-in with the government, and they're saying you're going to be mouthing off about the government. You got to be very careful what you're saying, because they might send you to exile. You might get in trouble. Now, there's a few ways of looking at exile and what this trouble means. So, and this relates to all the next verses that we'll sort of like break them down sort of together. There are interpretations that it means physical, right? You get misplaced because you were mouthing off and because some political issue happens, and you go and your students are going with you. However, in this new context, the words you were using in place A are no longer as relevant for place B. And people might misunderstand you then if you're still using that old version. Let's say if you were in Israel and you were just thrown to Babylon, you're going to have to use some sort of Babylonian sort of techniques, because that's going to be more relevant. And the focus is generally on the students here, not on the sage himself, because the presumption is the sage himself can handle being misplaced. The students, the people, cannot. Okay. And then in that case, they would misunderstand him, and they find themselves in a place where there's bad waters, as in they need to go find water someplace else. They need to find sustenance someplace else, and it's really not the ideal match, and they get into trouble and they die, whether spiritually or actual physically, just from getting in trouble. There's other interpretations which will say the ideas you have may make your students feel like they're in exile and ungrounded. As in, you're now coming and you're teaching, and this relates back to the Zohar idea. You're now teaching the secrets of the Torah. And if you're not careful with how you're explaining those things, someone might find himself very quickly in some, heretical place. And then he is misunderstanding your words. The water that he's drinking is now becoming evil water for him. This is no longer healthy water for him. And the students after that are really going to completely go off the reservation. you're going to really lose them over here. There's a small hint over here to, the ideas that happened in Christianity at the time. If you go according to the claim that and Jacob likes this with regards to the Dead Sea Scrolls, where there's a misinterpretation of mysticism over there. And you could see where the Trinity is potentially also a misunderstanding of the Kabbalists talking about the Shekhinah and different elements over there. And that would be a perfect example of Hizaru b'divrachem, right? Things could be potentially misunderstood in that case. So it's really so both, whether it's physical or whether it's spiritual, there's an exile that you could be bringing upon yourself and your students.
What does it mean by chovat galut? Is if I translate that more directly, is the not the requirement, but something with the requirement of exile. What is the chovat galut? What is that? Why is it put in that way?
There's also an interpretation, which is if you are not careful with your words, then the punishment, according to Jewish law, is that you have to be exiled. You specifically, as that rabbi.
So it says techovu chovat galut. So you will be required to be in exile. V'tiglu lamakom mayim areim, and the result to that is that bad water will tiglu. What is it? Tiglu.
No. So now that you are, and this works whether it's physical or whether it's spiritual, but you will be sentenced to exile.
Yep.
Right. And then you will be exiled to the place where there's the evil water. Now, where is this place where the evil water is? Whether it's in this new understanding that your students have, because they don't fully understand where you were coming from. They're in this place where there's evil water. There's another little hint over here when the 4 sages enter the Pardes with Rabbi Akiva. He warns them, the Pardes being the secret levels of ascension in Kabbalah. I'll use just, it's a little more complicated than that, no nuance in that, but for all intents and purposes. And he tells them, when you see the pillars of water, don't say water, water. Don't assume you understand. And there's a whole deep understanding of what that means. But the idea is that don't assume you understand what you're seeing right away. So here too is these people are they're already exiled to this next place. And in this next place already, they can't discern anymore between the good water and the evil water. And because they can't discern, the next act is Vayishtu hatalmidim habayim acharchem veyamutu. They will drink from this and they will die. V'nitza shem shamayim mitchalel. Right? And thus the name of heaven becomes profaned. So why is that? You could be well, obviously, you have all these dead bodies on the street right now. So, that's obviously not a good look. Mm-hmm. But more with the spiritual interpretation, which would be that no longer have control over what your students said, right? There's a famous example with gossip, right? Which is gossip is you take a pillow and you open it up in the air, out your window, and you let all the feathers fly. Even if you start apologizing, there's no way you're ever going to be able to bring back all those feathers back inside. Mm-hmm. So here too, you had some great idea that was misunderstood, whether because you weren't careful or whether because they weren't drinking properly, or whether because you had the right intentions, but you came out with a controversial take, which you should have been more mindful for political reasons, and it got you in trouble. Your students now are running along, quoting you, saying, he said 1, 2, 3, but that's not at all what he said. And then you have a false narrative being spread, and that is where you have Shem Shamayim Mitchalel, and that is obviously not a good position to be in.
Yeah, it connects to, I think when I was reading the Rambam, he was talking about how, especially if you're a sage, if you're somebody that's gadol b'Torah, a great Torah scholar, and you act in not in a bad way, then that is you need to be super careful, because if you do that, that is also sacrilege or just a chilul Hashem, because people will associate your behavior and how you're acting, and here, like we're saying, your ideas with what the religion, what Judaism, its ideals and virtues or morals.
Agreed.
And the other note, the small note that I had here is that when we had the Mishnah Daled on the fourth verse that we looked at before, 2 times before, I think it was, they all also used the idea of the metaphor of water, of like be thirsty and
be thirsty. Exactly. They said like you should drink from what your rabbis are saying, and then there we said like you got to be careful like what you're drinking. Both you need to be mindful of the cup you're breaking up. Second of all, you need to be mindful of what you're saying. So exactly. So these are definitely hints of that. However, one earlier on was on you, the house owner, right? When you invited them into the house. Here it's on the sage himself. And the focus, again, in the context is earlier on, the first few Mishnah we have, if you recall, we said we started with the individual to the house to the community, right? We're going
set it up. Like we set up the situation up where we're handling the individual, handling the house. Now the house is ready for a bigger ruling party or a government.
Right, exactly. However, in this point of history, we're getting closed back down again, right? We're dealing with the government is now working out. Like we didn't go as far as saying, and now get involved in the government and be in every level of the government right now. Rather, there's like a step back, and we're saying like, okay, now Herod's taking over. This dream we had of like fully being integrated with, let's say, the policy and the government. And the study hall, it's not working as much. So we're going to take a step back. And because of that, the focus is going to be on you, sages, right? Like we're done with the high priest. We're focusing now inwards right now. And we need to be extra careful.
Yeah.
Beseder. Okay. Mishnah 12. These are short and sweet little Mishnahs. Okay. Big, famous character. Hillel v'Shamai kiblu mehem. Hillel omer, havei metamidav shel Aharon, ohev shalom, verodef shalom, ohev et habriot, umekarvan laTorah. Hillel and Shammai received the oral tradition from them, Shmaya and Avtalion. Hillel used to say, be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving mankind, and drawing them closer to the Torah. All right. So off the bat, you have, from a context point of view, again, a little dig over here. So first of all, Herod's fully in charge right now. We're no longer in this transition period. He's there. There's a lot of strife, even though specifically between Hillel and Shammai, as in the actual individuals, there was not much tension. Between their students, there was a tremendous amount of tension. Hey, Jason, you're welcome to join as well. There was a tremendous amount of tension between these two groups, the Hillelian school of thought and the Shammai school of thought.
How do we know that?
That there was tension? The Talmud talks to us about this. So much so that it got to a place where in the ninth of Adar became a fast, because that's when the splits started between them, like the major divisions between the two groups. Evil waters, what mean? Andrew, we'll get back. You know what? Because we passed through that, we'll go back to that again, and then we'll jump back on. I'm trying to be a little interactive. The evil waters we were talking about are the pure water is the wisdom you receive from the wisdom tradition you receive from your sages. And we were saying that if the sages are not careful with their words, they could be subject to exile, and then find themselves in a place where their wisdom is no longer understood as well, because they're in this new space. and due to that, their students would need to receive their water from someplace else, and it would be evil water. Or there could be an interpretation that the things that you are explaining, while your intentions are pure, could be too complicated or too abstract, or maybe or they're misunderstanding what you're saying and taking your pure water, and unfortunately, through that process, it gets converted to evil water that could lead to their death. It's speaking here most probably allegorically or metaphorically. Sorry, that's what I meant. Andrew, I hope that answers your question. Okay, back to Hillel and Shammai. Okay, so we were talking about them, that there was a fast day is commemorated because the splits started between them. Now there was a time where while there was always disagreements or many disagreements, the daughters of Hillel and the daughters of Shammai would still marry within each other, so they still saw themselves as one group. In this case, Hillel and Shammai also, like Shamayim, is very much like the sky, which is like the heavenly law, which is very deen, justice. And Hillel also with the hay inside is more connected to chesed, and also his character talks about that as well. So you have that split. Now, generally speaking, the Hillelian school of thought is more lenient, and the Shammai school of thought is more strict. Right. Almost all the halachot, the ultimate decisions made between these two different schools of thought, the halacha ultimately leaned in the direction of Hillel, besides some specific cases. Now there was an idea that's out there that became very popular. Even its source it's not such a popular idea, but became more popular, that in the end of days, or in the times of Messiah, the laws will all be according to Shammai and not like Hillel. And that would make sense, not because we're going to accept a more stringent lifestyle. However, once we were all enlightened and we could all see God's glory, it would be obvious for us to do to put in the extra effort and do the extra work. But generally speaking, we go according to Hillel. And while both ideas could be true in the sense of that they're both for heaven's sake, eventually you need to make a decision. Now, as far as there were times where the law was according to Beit Shammai, and that's usually when they were not in a majority of opinion, but rather the majority of power. They had the most amount of power, and even led to a period where they killed many of the Hillelian students as well. And here too, the Talmud gives us an example that day was akin to the day of the golden calf. And it's not because of the idol worship, but because the day of the golden calf, the Levites killed 3,000 of their own people. And here they're saying also this is reminds us of that day where all these people were killed. Just two more things with regards to this pairing and this context. There is some that say that that due to the split in opinion between Hillel and Shammai with regards to are Gentiles deserving of a place in the world to come? And Shammai is no, and Hillel is yes, assuming they keep all the 7 Noahide laws. And this, according to some, leads to a chain reaction to he sends out his students. Hillel, Jesus, they make a new religion. This comes from pure purposes, really. So there could be a universal Judaism, so to speak, for the rest of the world. And that way they could all come under the umbrella of the 7 Noahide laws. And then they will all have a peace in the world to come. However, somewhere along the way, it gets a little nuts. This has to do with this, you have to then have a discussion about like, was Hillel or other in his group part of the Essenes group? But that's for a separate historical conversation. And in the schools, Shammai would never, what they say, the schools of Shammai would never teach the method of Hillel. And in the Hillel school, what they would first do is steel man the version of Shammai and only then teach their position. And their attitude was like, we fully need to understand where our brother is coming from. And so this was also like the original steel man was Hillel. Okay, so now we'll jump. Was that okay, or a little too much?
No.
Also, one more thing, which is like a famous story.
Now it's too much. No, I'm kidding. You can go for it.
It's like interesting to think that on this issue, Jesus is more on Hillel's side. Most everything else seemed to be the Shammai side. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know. Like, I mean, when he has his issues with the money changers or with the Pharisees, with not what they're teaching, but what they're doing. There's some of that also in Jewish thought about the Shammaian schools of thought, that they were very strict on the letter of the law, but they weren't actually maintaining the actual spirit of the law, which is, I believe, what JC was pushing. Okay, so the one thing I wanted to say about Hillel, there's a famous story. He comes from Babylon and he has to do manual labor, and he is very poor, and he wants to study in the study hall of Shmai and of Talyon. However, he does not have enough money. He can't come in. So he climbs onto the roof and he listens from the roof, but it's a snowstorm, but he doesn't stop. And then the snow covers him, and all the snow covers him and the skylight. There's no light inside the study hall. So they rush up to the top and they find him over there and they bring him in. And they're very nice and warm to him. And the way he gets to his rise to fame, his claim to, his rhyme to prominence is there is an issue that the rabbis are not solving with regards to a Passover sacrifice. And through his understanding or his interpretation methods of the text, he manages to come up with an answer. And this to everyone is very novel. And he comes in and he also he starts the president role inside the Sanhedrin. And he also brings on the 7 different like hermeneutics tools of how to learn the Bible. There's different rules of like when there's similar words. Also, we don't have to get too deep into that, but that's Hillel. Okay. So he tells us, be of the disciples of Aaron. Okay. Loving peace and pursuing peace, loving mankind and drawing them closer to the Torah. So first of all, why like Aaron, right? Why won't we come and say like Moses? So what's so magical about Aaron specifically is and I mentioned this before in this little corner, but Aaron is the correction to all the older brothers in the past that sinned, all the way from Cain and Abel, who could not handle the older brother getting being rewarded. And there's Isaac, there's Ishmael, there's Esau. None of them can handle this tension. There's a fascinating verse when Aaron is coming to see his brother. Moses says, I'm going to see Aaron. Moses is talking to God, and God says, Aaron's coming on the way to you. And Moses goes out and says that Aaron was happy in his heart, right? Like the Torah is giving us a glimpse of like, no one said anything, but we want to let you know that Aaron was so happy to know that his brother just received like this position right now. Now, that was a correction because he managed to know, he's like, even though I'm the older brother, I know my place And because of that, he was really chosen. And that's why the whole priestly class itself is chosen, because even Moses and Aaron are both Levites. However, from Aaron, we have the priest because of this action, because his true understanding of his position and how he still loved his brother. Now, there's another focus, which is, you would think that, trying to do kumbaya world is not, it's not such an honorable position. However, they're stressing to you that, like, Aaron the Great, this was like his main occupation. This is what he was known for doing. There's a joke how, like, he would go to one person and say, like, there's two people that fighting, and you'd go to Jake and say, like, listen, Jake, really, Sam forgives you. And then you go to Sam, really, Jake forgives you. And then they would meet. He probably pulled it off once, because eventually they were like, he still owes me 10 grand. Okay. Right. So they wanted to focus and stress the fact that it's also an honorable job. Now, also the terminology over here of loving peace and pursuing peace, these are active, right? With shalom, it's pursuing. It's almost like chasing peace. I think pursuing. I mean, I guess pursuing is a good enough word, but it's not about being passive and saying, like, I'm okay. I'm okay with the people around me. It's go out there. This should be like, a 9-to-5 job that you're taking on, which is actively going and pursuing peace and removing unnecessary hate. Okay, so the terminology is very specific over here about ohev verodef, is you're taking action. And then we go much wider. We come and say, seemingly you're saying, okay, I'm going after people and I'm trying to make peace in my neighborhood. Ohev et habriot umekarvan laTorah, loves all the creations. So here too, it's not enough to then you say, okay, I'm going to be accepting of the creations, or like I could tolerate them. It's, you need to love anything that you could identify as God's creation. And this also, if people look at Jews as being very, inward focused, there's definitely a lot of love shared out there. And it's really, this goes from Gentile to Jew. You could decide to look at nature and art, and nature and animals and anything like that also in this rubric. However, generally speaking, it's talking about people, but all humankind, all creations of God need to be fall under this category, that you need to be chasing and trying to make peace with them. And the idea is that the peace is the goal, right? Like, this is a goal that we're putting on a pedestal over here, saying that, like, we need to achieve it, so much so that we need to take time out of our day to do it. We need to be active about it. And the focus can't only be inward, rather it needs inward, more into the community, more about anyone you see out there. Anytime you're seeing hate out there, and the concept of shalom obviously is a very profound concept. But once we did all this kumbaya and we're loving and we're chasing after these people in all creations, umekarvan laTorah, drawing them closer to the Torah. This includes the Gentile, right? Brings it closer to the Torah. So it's, if loving is one goal, and you managed to love this idea of this other person, you managed to maintain this peaceful environment. Once that's done, you should then attempt to bring them closer to the Torah. And by bringing them closer to the Torah, this isn't trying to convert them, rather trying to put now this concept of peace through the context of the Torah, and trying to impart the Torah wisdom and elevate them specifically as well, right? So once you get them to their place and they're around you and they're in your surroundings, you could slowly bring them up. And now there's different ways of how to interpret drawing them close. It's either by actively teaching them and bringing them close when they're ready, or it's passive, which is because you're chasing them and you're on top of them, assuming you are a good individual, they're going to feel embarrassed in your space, right? We're around this good guy all the time, is rubbing off on us, so to speak, which if you remember last time we were talking about being very wary of the dangerous or the evil neighbor. So here too, you're talking about someone that is going, into the thorny bush,
Mm-hmm.
right? To try to act and try to maintain peace. Now, unlike with the evil neighbor, which is like, you shouldn't just be chilling with your boy smoking a J if he's an evil neighbor. However, if your evil neighbor is arguing with people right now and creating chaos, potentially you should be running into the thorny bush and trying to create peace.
Right. Yeah. So there's the trade-off of intervention.
Right. So the trade-off of an intervention. And zooming out for a second, again, this is a response to, why don't we say over here, why are we saying, why do we say be of the disciples of Aaron and don't say be like Aaron?
Right. Yeah. So that was my question. This might be more literal, but it might connect or not. But yeah. So I was wondering if there is something about it. With telling you about Aaron, is there something about the priestly obligation of like the role of the priest? Because like the students of Aaron, I would assume is he referring to the priest that will come after him, or so? What's the connection?
So follow that. Who are the priests that come after them?
Who are the priests that come after him?
Yeah. Saying if you continue with the priests that come after them, you're going all the way back to Beit Hashmonai. The Hasmoneans are coming from the priests who became corrupt. So he's coming and saying, I'm creating a difference right now. Right? There was the Aaron reign.
Or redeeming him from the past. Right.
I'm sorry?
Redeeming them from the past. You're saying there was an element of that went away, but he's trying to go deeper into it.
So he's saying, I'm skipping a generation.
Yeah.
I'm going to the students. I'm the students of Hillel. And that has nothing to do with my lineage. Hillel is from, he wasn't a Levite. I know his mom was from Judah. I think his dad. Either way, he's not a Levite. And he's saying that like be like the disciples of Aaron. We're all the disciples of Aaron because, wink, wink, the Aaron institution, it became corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And we know it became corrupt because the disciples would be following peace and running after peace like Aaron did. Yeah. But they're not doing that anymore, right? We have just trouble from Herod. There's murderings going everywhere. So here, there's a play. There's a subliminal message over here to the community, seemingly, which is, again, using the word carefully, which is we're skipping a generation because we realize we need to see ourselves as the disciples right now and not as a direct lineage. And this, again, is part of moving away already from Shemayan of Talyon. We're moving away from the high priest. So here, even more so, there's another sever where we're not even connected to that lineage anymore. We're seeing ourselves as the students right now. And, seemingly crowning the Sanhedrin as like, this is the institution right now that we're moving forward with.
Right. And this is the modus operandi that it should have.
Correct. And this exactly. And this is what this should be the framing. And this relates to what I said earlier about Hillel saying that even the Gentiles have their place in the world to come, which relates back to Ohevet Habriot, right? Loving mankind. Here it says loving mankind. Mankind, I don't think is a broad enough translation of here because Briot would really be the creations. Like Briat is creation, so it's really it's sort of simplistic, but I think very deep when it's telling you to like sort of to take a step back and say not only should you be pursuing peace, however, if you take a step back and look at God's creation, they are living in peace in a certain, there's even like a peaceful chaos, but like there is peace out there naturally. And that's what you should be trying to, orient to.
Yeah. And the Briot comes back later on when it's the creations, like Ohevet Habriot, Ohevet Hamakom. which is I really like that piece. Loving creation, loving God, or not loving creation, not loving God. So it's gonna come back.
I would say let's stop here now with our Mishnahs. However, I am glad to open it up. I mean, I'll put another invite again. If anyone wants to join and just free association schmooze and discuss. If not, we'll catch up with you guys next week. But we had a nice attendance today, seemingly.
Next week, I probably won't be available though. So
what's going on?
I'm gonna be in Austin.
Yeah, I get it. New job. Now you hate Torah. All right, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you planning? Are you planning to have any study group over there? Do you know anyone in the community there?
I mean, my trip is just setting that up. So that trip is just to actually just find a place to live, and then later on, I'm gonna have to look that up. I've heard there's a bunch of people from Austin or around in the corner as well. But it's definitely bigger than what I have in Memphis right now. So yeah.
It's definitely bigger than what you have in Memphis currently. Okay, so that's definitely nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Are you don't have to answer this, obviously. Do you on Shabbat, do you go to the synagogue or no?
I don't know. I mean, I occasionally would go to the Chabad to do maybe Kabbalat Shabbat, but not on a consistent level.
I see. Last week, this week was a very fascinating weekly portion. We read the story of we have the story of Bilam, which is a fascinating character. He is seen at times as at the same status or level as Moses. Sometimes our sages have even claimed that he's at a higher level than Moses. And it's a fascinating story because no Israelites are involved in the story. Like, they're not talking. Moses isn't talking. We're just being told all of this. Moses is telling us all of this. I think in Jordan a few years ago, they found actually like some sort of like carving that actually talks about this guy, this wizard Bilam, which was fascinating. But all of Bilam's, there's this king Balak that is very mad at the Israelites taking over, coming in. So he brings over the big wizard and he says, I'm going to pay you to curse these guys out. And every time he tries to curse them, there's a famous story with the donkey, but every time he tries to curse them, it ends up turning into a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was discussing with some people that the fact that, and in one of the blessings, he also says that he hopes that his at the end of days, his lot is like with the people, with the Israelites.
He would die like the Israelites, right?
Exactly. And I think it's like earlier stages of seeing the tensions of, let's say, Jewish wisdom and divinity, and let's say the secular channels of divinity as well. Well, you're seeing sort of this tension, right? He's trying to curse them. However, all these curses ultimately turn into blessings. He himself sees himself as like, if I'm dying, I want to be grafted onto this, like to this group eventually. And we also say some of his blessings we say in our daily prayer. So I think that this is more of an answer of, what was to come, where there is truth in worldly divinity, which is like, whether you want to look at the East or whether you want to even look at different traditions of the West, we don't have a monopoly on that conversation. Now, I personally have my own beliefs of like whether or not I've spoken before about like, different frequencies or points of orientation, but clearly the Torah is trying to tell us that there's other conversations going on with God aside from our story. Because there's this other guy that has this conversation with God and is having conversations with God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it says, I mean, in terms of Balak or Bilam, sorry, it says, I mean, his power is unquestioned, or like it's obviously he has a lot of power, because if he was able to, if God let him voice the curse, then it will work. And at the end of the day, also, I mean, he did offer good advice to what will happen next. But so he had the power, and he had the choice to do with that power what he wished. But in that specific scenario, God was subverted that, right? Or it just like didn't let that happen. So I guess yes, you have the power to do things in the world. The question is, how are you taking that into action? What are you going to do with it? What is the purpose that you're using it for?
I mean, this relates to our, our holy water and evil water sort of situation, right? It would really depend. I mentioned this on one of the Voxer groups, how it was, similar to Nietzsche. He comes out pretty hard against religion and God and Christianity. However, in the book, in his essay, The Dawn, he talks about there, which is like a weird, I have to get the exact quote, but and I'm remembering it in Hebrew, but he talks about how that, like, Yisrael Atika Yomin, the old this group of Israel eventually will will be triumphant, and we'll all benefit from him. Which to me, that was like sort of echoing again like a Bilam, and looking at Nietzsche as being, let's say, the king philosopher, which also brought that whole other channel of wisdom, which seemingly was knocking into each other, but at some point it needs to be integrated. And, you could call that like what Peterson and John Vervaeke are trying to do on their level, where like, there is that integration. I mean, there's a famous, story in the Gemara, in the Talmud, that talks about the gifts. Hello, Richard. The gifts that we know what Isaac gets from Abraham, and then there are the gifts that he gives the concubine's children. And it says over there that he gives them gifts, and he goes like from east of east, like the far east, basically. And the Talmud tells us that this is during the period where the first Vadas are being written out, and Abraham is giving different versions of spiritual practices to the East for their connection to the divine, which the Talmud then says we as Israelites / Jews call tum'ah, unholy. However, that's just for us. It's not inherently built in unholy. For them, for the East, that is their tool for divinity. There's a play on words that Brahma is Abraham backwards, and like, that's like where one of those things are coming from. However, the Talmud then gives a story of Rava bar Barchana, this man, and he goes to the Far East, and he says that he's shocked to see that some of their teachings are very, very similar to ours. And he says, like, also there's some differences over there, and he says how you have to be very careful because it's so similar where it could go off. And then in today's day and age, in some circles, the idea would be that at some point, a lot of paganism got like intertwined, but like, the true sparks that we're still seeing in the East, those are remnants of methods and tools that were gifted to the East by Abraham. But that's not an academic claim.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't. It's very interesting. I don't know about that connection. So, but it's interesting to think about how all that connects.
Yeah, I mean, you there's there's I'm trying to see if I could jump into this. So in the days of creation, there are stagnant days and there are days with motion. So let's say you'll have God, there's the waters, and then there's a day where God creates the fish. So one day would be like stagnant water, one day would be water with motion.
Mhm.
There's the land, and then there's the animals on the land. So there's a few of these basically. So there's days, and then there's these days with motion. And this would be sort of split between east and west. There's some verses that correlate with this, but you'll trust me for a second that there's some verses that give hints to east and west. And the idea would be that the west has are enacting the days in motion. There's a telos that we're going forward, and that's sort of that attitude.
Mhm.
And then there is the west, which is very stagnant, right? There's like, very zen. They're wiping away of everything to the nothingness of nirvana. So there's
The
that.
East. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And where do you find that combination? You find that combination on the Sabbath, or embodied in Israel, which is taking west and east and having 6 days worth of motion, 7 day of stagnation.
Yeah,
And
it's funny.
and
Well, it's
there's a play on that as well.
yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about that on Shabbat too. I think the most 2 days ago, of how it really felt a little bit like the whole Sabbath felt like what I would try to do in meditation, which I don't really do, but I tried for a while at some point. But it really feels like that for the whole day of like, I know like the thoughts about things like the things about the job that I need to, like about my job that I need to do, or all these kind of like mundane things that I do during the week. On Shabbat, it's like they go into my head, but it's like they know that it's not really the time to dwell on it, because I'm not gonna be able to look it up or spend time on it. So it's kind of like almost it's a very kind of that constraint really cleanses in a way that I didn't expect it to. Especially now as I start to do it more explicitly, intentionally.
So we say about the Sabbath, me'ein olam haba, right? It's as if the world to come, and the idea that is being felt in that stagnation, so to speak, or where you feel very much like the worries just melt away. And I mean,
they don't have space. The worries don't have space. It's like they
yeah,
don't.
correct. They don't.
Even if they come for a second, they know, oh, this is Shabbat. Well, there's no like, there's the person that I'm trying to, like, let's say if the thought is separate from you, the thought is thinking, if the person that I'm trying to inhabit right now, he's busy on Shabbat, he's not gonna be able to look up on the computer what needs to be done, or do anything about it. So it's kind of like I shouldn't be here anyway. Like I'll just come back on Sunday. That's kind of that was my feeling when I was having that.
Well, I think it moves from a place. I mean, what at least I try to do for myself is move from a place of where, like you just said, like I'll just deal with this on Sunday, and even though that's like that's a healthy feeling to have, there's something about, and the sages talk about this about asur lechashev cheshbonot. You shouldn't be making calculations either.
Right.
And it's more about a mindset which is really allowing yourself to rest and be fully integrated with your surroundings and nature. And there isn't the need to be making those calculations and looking at yourself, observing from the outside, whether you are part of that. You are allowing, in a certain way, God, who stopped and rested on the seventh day, to do that alongside him, where you're also taking a step back and resting and interacting passively. which again would be like sort of that would be the mix between the Western and the Eastern world of having a telos but doing so passively, doing so alongside God. So yes,
Right.
it's a magic moment.
Yeah. What is the story about I don't know where I heard this about the person that makes the chair. He makes like he's busy making different kinds of chairs and like just busying himself, let's say, all week. And then another person asks him like, why are you making? What are you making the chair for? Like, don't you want to just like sit in it and like just enjoy what you did? Like you made it. It's really nice. You made it comfortable. There's a pillow. There's that. But the person making the chair is so busy making the chair that he doesn't stop to really like enjoy any of the new creation that he made, right? But that's the point, is like you make the chair, then you need to sit on it and enjoy it at some point.
I mean, that's what's so deep about God stopping and says, and it was good, via tov mod, right? Or there's something about God stopping and saying, you would ask, like, well, isn't it obvious that it's good? It's been created by God. But there's also sort of a hint of like, the beauties in the eye of the beholder over there, which is even God took a step back and said like, am I happy with this? I am happy with this. There's also a version where the land itself tries to create man and fails. And then later on, there's like another attempt of God creating man, which requires more of a divine act, and it can't just happen from ground up. It requires divinity as well. But it really is a fantastic gift that allows you to be transported it allows you to be fully present in the present, be shot back to the past with all the generations before you, feeling a sense of the future at the same time while you're enjoying this seemingly stagnant yet vibrant day. So in Jonathan Peugeot's book, Language of Creation, he actually has a pretty short few thoughts on the Shabbat, which are also very interesting as well. While I see that some people are talking over here, I'm going to have to boogie.
Sounds good.
And I also see that Pastor Paul joined us as well. CRC guys, please. Right. I'm not a rabbi, but the wisdom here is being brought on by questions such as yours, Ben, and the interactions of the people on the comments, which allow this to feel lively and, as Grimm says, virtually not alone. So we are thankful to you. And maybe if someone's running a live chat right now, we'll jump on. But for right now, it looks like I need to go. I could be free in another half an hour. Ben, thanks so much. You'll shoot me a message if we're on next week or not. And if not, if there's a day we want to try to do it earlier or not, worst case scenario, we'll just skip it to next week.
Okay, sounds good. I'll let you know and I'll update.
Catch you on the flip, brother.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You.